A young woman disappeared on her way to work. Witnesses heard her screams and saw two unknown men get into her car. The next day, police found her car burned, but the woman herself was nowhere to be found. After this, a woman contacted detectives and told them she had a vision of the location where the victim was. Just a few hours later, she indeed found the body in a deserted area outside the city. In this video, we will tell you the story of Melanie Uribe and try to figure out if this case was really solved by a psychic. 31-year-old Melanie Uribe worked as a nurse in the Californian city of Burbank, located near Hollywood. She was a single mother raising her 8-year-old son. Acquaintances and colleagues described her as a responsible employee and a devoted mother, so they all became worried when, on December 15, 1980, Melanie did not show up for her night shift at the hospital without any warning. After waiting for some time, the head doctor called her home phone, but there was no answer. This was very strange. If the woman was neither at work nor at home, where could she be? Her colleagues decided not to delay and contacted the police. A report was immediately filed, and the search began. The very next morning, a grim discovery awaited the detectives. They found her burnt-out pickup truck and her nurse's uniform next to it. Soon they managed to find the first witnesses. According to them, two men got into Melanie's pickup truck while she was stopped at a red light. The witnesses noted that it looked as if the unknown men had forced her to let them into the vehicle as they heard a woman's screams. Unfortunately, a rough description of the suspects did not help the police track them down, and the search for the woman continued. But the detectives had no leads. This went on until December 17th, 2 days after Melanie's disappearance. A woman named Etta Smith contacted the police. She claimed she had a vision and knew the approximate location of the missing person. Her story was as follows. Etta heard about Melanie's disappearance on the radio while at work. The report mentioned that police were currently searching houses in the area near where her car was found. At that moment, it suddenly occurred to her that the missing woman was not in some building, but in an open area. Immediately after that, she allegedly had a vision. Before her was a canyon and a winding road. There were sparse bushes around, and hills were visible in the distance. Ahead was a path leading to something white. She couldn't make out what it was from behind the bushes, but she was sure it was Melanie's uniform and her body. According to Etta, the image was as clear and vivid as in a movie. Despite this, she couldn't name the exact location, but was confident she could find her way there. The police were skeptical of her story. This was far from the first time that self-proclaimed psychics had contacted the police trying to help find people. However, Etta's case stood out from similar situations. Firstly, she had never considered herself a psychic and had never experienced visions before that day. Secondly, the woman held a prestigious position at an aerospace plant and had top-level security clearance. All this made the police listen to the woman's words. Of course, they didn't believe her story about a vision, but they had no other leads at the time. The woman was given a map, and she showed the approximate area where she believed Melanie's body was located. She pointed to a territory on the outskirts of the San Fernando Valley, near Lopez Canyon. The area was substantial, but the police sent their people there anyway. Meanwhile, Etta feared that her words would not be taken seriously and that the search would not be conducted properly. Her so-called premonition prompted her to go to the location herself. Taking several family members with her, including her young daughter, she drove to the indicated location. Driving along the canyon, she allegedly felt Melanie's presence and realized the girl's body was at the bottom of the canyon. She decided to drive down and noticed fresh tire tracks ahead. At that moment, she said she knew again. These tire tracks were connected to the missing woman. Driving further down, Etta's daughter noticed an object sticking out of the bushes from the car window. Etta stopped the car, walked closer, and saw Melanie's body. The only clothes on her were the shoes from her nurse's uniform. It was these shoes that were sticking out of the bushes. Etta reported her discovery to the police, who arrived on the scene and handed the body over to medical examiners. They confirmed the victim's identity. It was indeed Melanie. The woman had died from beatings, and before that, the unknown assailants had sexually assaulted her. Now, look at this situation from the police's perspective. A woman comes to them and points to an area where a missing person's body is located. A few hours later, she goes to that location herself and somehow actually finds Melanie there. Naturally, the first thing detectives thought was that Etta was involved in the girl's death, and they arrested her. The woman was interrogated for several hours. She agreed to take a polygraph test, and the device indicated she was not lying. But this was still not enough for the police. The detectives claimed that Etta was trying her best to deceive the device by controlling her breathing and masking her lies. The police had two theories. Either the woman was involved in Melanie's abduction, or she indirectly knew some details of the crime from the perpetrators. For example, she could have heard from acquaintances that they knew something. In any case, the detective's task was to get to the truth. Even if Etta had heard details of the crime through a chain of witnesses, the police could have traced it back to the criminals. But the woman stood firm that only a vision had helped her find Melanie's body, and that she had heard no details from anyone else. If Etta did know the details of the crime through a chain of people who had initially received the information from the criminals themselves, why did she go to the police? There are also several possibilities here. Either she was covering for someone who had this information, but couldn't go to the police themselves, or she was seeking financial gain for helping the investigation. These were the detectives' theories, and none of them seriously considered the vision theory. Etta was kept in custody, and the next morning she was formally charged with murder. With the fact that the woman knew the location of the body, the police were already preparing the case for court. But 4 days after the arrest, there was an unexpected turn. A police informant in the African-American ghetto told detectives that a certain young man had bragged to his friends that he and his buddies had killed a woman and gotten away with it. The police found this person and brought him to the station. There was no evidence against him, so the police needed a confession. Pretending they had enough direct evidence of his guilt, the police presented him with a choice. Only a confession and turning in his accomplices would help him avoid the death penalty, which was in use in California in those years. Here, the detectives weren't lying. If a court found a person or group guilty of such a brutal crime, there was a high probability the criminals would receive execution, not a life sentence. And it worked. The young criminal feared for his life and decided to confess, ratting out the two friends with whom he had committed the crime. The perpetrators turned out to be 3 African Americans, 20-year-old Luis Morgan, 21-year-old Spencer Nelson, and another 17-year-old teenager whose name was not disclosed due to his minority. The other 2 killers were arrested and interrogated. Both confessed to their guilt. They accurately described the events of that night and showed the police where they had left Melanie's body. Given that this information had not been published anywhere, only the real killers could have known it.
So what was their motive?
Here, everything is as simple as it is tragic. For the criminals, murder and robbery were almost a fun pastime, so they attacked the woman without a second thought as soon as they saw the opportunity. It is also worth noting that in the 1980s in the USA, relations between the black and white populations were very tense. One could go into endless detail here, but racial subtext could also have played a role in the choice of victim. With the confessions in hand, the court sentenced all 3 to life imprisonment. But the story doesn't end there. Let's get back to Etta Smith. The criminals had told the police all the details of what they had done, but they denied knowing this woman. It was impossible to find any connection between them. Etta was much older and lived in a completely different place. It was highly unlikely that 3 young men from an African-American ghetto would have, under any circumstances, told her about the crime. Given all this, the police had to release the woman and drop all charges against her that same day. Since then, she has returned to her normal life. According to her, the visions never recurred. In 1987, almost 7 years after these events, Etta decided to sue the police for the damages caused to her. Despite the fact that the police had all legal grounds for her arrest, she managed to win the case and receive just over $26,000 in compensation. Initially, her lawyer had requested $250,000, but the judge considered this amount excessive for 4 days of confinement. Many years later, people in Hollywood became excited about the idea of making a film or a series based on this story, focusing on the character of Etta. But so far, this idea has not been realized, and perhaps never will be.
Now let's consider the question of whether Etta Smith really managed to find Melanie's body through a psychic vision. As I said earlier, cases of psychics contacting the police are quite common, as, for example, in the story of Kristen Smart. Moreover, sometimes superstitious police officers themselves turn to them for help, as in the case of Miguel Biggs. But in the overwhelming majority of cases, they provide the police with completely useless and inaccurate data that is nothing more than their own guesswork. The case of Etta Smith stands out from the crowd because the woman actually found the victim's body without any outside help. Does this prove that psychics exist? Or is it one of those rare cases where a guess turns out to be accurate? One could assume that Etta knew the area well and constructed a logical chain. Several unknown people get into a woman's car and then drive away with her. If they intend to take her to a quiet place and kill her without witnesses, a canyon could be one of the suitable locations. It's possible that Etta bet on this version and turned out to be right. But why would she do all this? She didn't ask for any money for her help, although she did sue the police 6 years later. Perhaps she wanted fame, and she certainly got it. She was interviewed, and newspapers wrote about her. It's possible that all of this was indeed for the attention. Personally, I am inclined to believe that there was no mysticism in this case, and we were witnesses to a rare stroke of luck. After all, why do thousands of similar cases remain unsolved, and psychics can do nothing about it? But what do you think it was? A clever game or a real vision? Be sure to write your thoughts on this in the comments, and thanks for watching.